What's going on, my friends? Welcome to episode 137 of the Money Peach Podcast Peach live show. And 137 episodes later, I remember when I first started this podcast, first started Money Peach, I went to a conference and I was standing in line at the food truck or somewhere. And I met this guy and he looked at me and he goes, "Are you a newbie too?" And we were both brand new into the personal finance world. And now 5 years later, I got Tyler on the show with me. Talaat McNeely, he is the co-founder. When I say co-founder, we're going to talk about that in a minute. But co-founder of His and Her Money. They're based out of Chicago, Illinois. And they are America's money expert when it comes to couples and money. That is the truth. So we're going to have a lot of fun on the show today. We're going to be talking about their story, coming together with marriage and money, coming together with money in the marriage. We're going to be talking about how they paid off debt, how they paid off their mortgage in 5 years. We're going to be showing you a clip of them going into the bank doing that, and a little bit about their business and how you can find out more about them. But I don't want to spoil the show. So Tyler, thank you so much for coming on the Money Peach podcast.
Peach, man, I'm happy to be here. Love you and Andrea. We started this journey together, and we've been rocking ever since. So, man, it's an honor to be a part of this podcast, man. Love the work that you guys are doing.
Well, hey, it's refreshing that in the very beginning when we started this, I remember there was a lot of people at the newbie orientation, and there's only a few of us left from that big group of people that are still out there pushing the message of personal finance, and marriage and all the other good stuff. But man, you have one of the most, if not the most, incredible story when it comes to money. And every time I tell it to someone, people are like, "Oh my gosh, I got to go listen to their show, or I got to go to their YouTube channel." By the way, we're going to talk about their YouTube channel. It has over 144,000 people that follow this channel. So extremely popular. But one of the things that I love talking about when I share your story with people is I always follow up, say, "You guys don't understand. They are the most normal, most down to earth, laid back, awesome people, and they just had this amazing story, this amazing brand." And I think it's because, I know it is, you're just so real. You don't sugarcoat anything. I love sometimes how one time I was I'll give you a story. One time I was a little lax in my business. I went to the conference and I wasn't signed up to speak or anything. And Tyler called me out. He's like, "Hey bro, why aren't you doing anything? Why are you sitting on the sidelines?" I love how you have that mentality where you're not afraid to say, like, "Here's what I see. Here's how you can make it better." But kind of backing up a little bit, tell us a little bit about your story, your marriage, your money, how His and Her Money came together. But let's just kind of go back to the very beginning between you and your wife, Ty.
Yeah. So it starts with pain. It starts the heart of our story. And maybe the reason that we're so, relatable is that this whole thing started with pain. And it's ironic that we teach money and marriage, and money was the reason that we almost didn't have a marriage. So we both have similar backgrounds as far as upbringing, two-parent household, very frugal parents on both sides. And we just had two different reactions to what we saw our parents do. So like I said, our parents were very good at stretching a dollar. My wife's interpretation was, this is how I'm going to live. I'm going to make sure that I'm smart with the financial decisions that I make. And so she went on to put herself through college, like working at the mall. And she graduated in 5 years instead of 4 because she was paying for it herself. But she had that type of foresight. She told herself that either I'm going to pay now or I'm going to pay later. So I can go straight through 4 years, take out a bunch of student loans, but then take a bunch of debt into my adulthood. Or I can grind now, go at a slower pace, and pay my way through college myself. And so she chose to do that. So she graduated completely debt free. She bought a car at like 19 and paid it off in 11 months. Like, she had that type of mentality from the jump. And she got a degree in finance. She worked in the finance industry, and she just was super wise. Great credit score, zero debt. Me, on the other hand, I took what I saw and I saw it as my parents being cheap. And so I told myself that when I got out on my own and had my own money, because of the fact that my parents never bought me anything name brand, I adapted the mentality that the only thing I will ever buy is name brand things. And so when I was out on my own, 17, left the house really young, joined the military, had my own income, out on my own, thousands of miles away from my parents. And I just lost my mind financially. And I was just buying stuff and racking up debt. And I looked up And I was over $30,000 in debt with nothing to show for it. No college, no real estate. This was all just stuff that was bought. Consumerism is where I went wrong. And it's at this point that we're coming together to be married. And so by the time I got to the point where we were engaged, my mentality had changed a little bit because I was so frustrated with the fact that I had a great career as far as income, but I never had any money at the end of the month because I didn't know what I was doing. And so I started to read books and watch television shows and read articles about money, trying to turn myself around. So my mentality and some of my behavior had changed, but I still had the consequences of my previous actions, meaning that debt was still being dragged behind me. So I did the absolute wrong thing, and I flat out lied to my then fiance about my financial situation. We did all the things you were supposed to do. Like we went to premarital counseling with our pastor. We looked at credit reports. She asked all the right questions, but I was so ashamed that I chose the wrong thing and to lie. And I tried to create a plan where I could somehow get out of debt before our marriage so that it wouldn't be something that she would have to worry about, something we wouldn't have to worry about as a unit. But God didn't let that happen. And I just got to a point where the lies were catching up to me. It was the wrong thing to do. And I had to confess because she kept asking probing questions because things weren't adding up. And so I just said, you know what, like 3 months before we were supposed to walk down the aisle, it all came out and we almost didn't get married. It wasn't the money thing. It was the lies. She wasn't sure if she could trust me. If you're lying about this, what else are you lying about? And so we had to go through a whole lot of praying, a whole lot of talking, a whole lot of conversating. I had to kind of just let it all out. And through it all, she stuck with me and she said, you know what, let's do this. And so we came together, we got married. And in the first year of our marriage, we got rid of all of our consumer debt.
So
Later on,
back up a second there real quick. So one of the things is you said something that stuck out to me. And I think it's important that we kind of touch on it because I know that there's going to be somebody listening or watching this right now, and they're kind of going through the same thing, right? They have a secret that they've buried down deep inside about the money. They don't want to tell the person they're supposed to tell, but they know they have to, right? What is that process? What was the catalyst that said, okay, I lied about it. Now I got to come clean. What was that like? And what was that conversation like? How did you approach it? Did you get caught or did you come clean? Or how does that work? Because I'm guessing somebody on the other side listening right now knows they need to make this conversation happen. But how did that happen?
So first of all, you got to stop believing the lie that I was telling myself was that if I told the truth, it would push her away. I would lose her by telling the truth. And, I don't know, different people have different faiths, but the faith that I grew up in and live by today, in the Bible, it says that the truth will set you free. And I was believing the opposite. I thought the truth would cause me to lose everything. So a lot of us are telling ourselves a lie. And we think that if we tell the authentic version of our story, that the person we care about the most will walk away. But if they walk away from the authentic you, then they should walk away. But chances are, if this is the person that you're supposed to be with that loves you the way that they say that they do, they're going to be disappointed, hurt, mad, but they're not necessarily going to walk away because now they can honor the fact that you're being humble enough to share your brokenness, to be vulnerable, to be transparent. So it got to the point where she was asking questions because the lies that I was telling started to just not add up. And so, and me, I'm like, okay, I just felt, I was pushed into a corner. Like, okay, this plan of yours is not working. It's time. And I was nervous in the mud, man. I really thought that I would lose her. But I got to the point to where I didn't have a choice, man. I had to tell her. And so I just called her, asked her to come by, confessed, and it was painful, man. It was painful. It was the trust being broken, so it took a lot to rebuild it, but I'm glad because 14 years later, we're still here. It didn't push her away. What it did was it made her come closer. She adapted the debt when we got married. It was never, okay, this is the debt that you created. Now you go figure out how to get rid of it. It was, this is our debt now, and we're going to figure it out. And we did.
You know, I mean, I can only imagine once you got that off your chest. For you too, it had to be so freeing because, you know, I think everybody out there in some way, some point of their life has lived a lie. Maybe it wasn't a crazy deep lie like this, but we've lived a lie. And once you can get away from that or free yourself from that lie, it's like the most freeing feeling knowing that I don't have to live like this. I don't have to keep making up stories and trying to make up one lie to cover the next lie. And it's like all you're doing is juggling lies. And over time, it's like you're trying to juggle 10 balls. And if you drop one, it's all going to come crashing down. That's stress. You can't sleep, you can't eat, you can't think. All you're worried about is what if they find out? And I mean, did you notice that as soon as you released that information to your wife, that it was, oh,
yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, you're absolutely right. Lies imprison you. They keep you bound because you're perpetually trying to cover up your tracks. Make sure you don't make a mistake. Make sure you remember what you said before. And it's just a dark place, man. And as soon as you adapt the truth, well, there's two sides. Yeah, you personally feel free because it's like, okay, I don't have to hide anymore. But then there's this devastation over here that you caused. And you have to learn from it. You have to learn from it because especially when we're talking about in the context of marriage, man, it's a marriage killer. A lot of other things are born out of a lie, whether that's financial, whether that's physical infidelity, emotional infidelity, whether that's mental abuse, physical abuse. A lot of it is born out of a secret. You know, a lot of those things are just the fruit, but the root of it is this secret life or this secret that you're withholding. It's a dark place for your marriage. So in order for light to come into your marriage, man, you got to let that stuff go. You got to get every ounce of darkness out of yourself and out of your relationship so that light can shine in and y'all can grow together. Y'all can come closer together. That would be the advice I would give to those who are holding on to a secret. You're only making the situation worse. You're telling yourself you're doing the right thing. You're telling yourself you're protecting the other person. You're really protecting yourself. You're really trying to preserve your image, the image that you created. That's not the authentic you. And the best thing you can do, especially with the person that you want to live your life with, is to be the authentic you. The flaws, the challenges that you have, the issues that you have yet to conquer. You need to be transparent because that's your teammate. That's the teammate that God gave you to walk this life out.
So what was that like coming together then and paying off this debt? You said there's about $30,000 in debt.
Yeah.
So that to me, that means it's like your wife said, you know, you're bringing the debt in, but that debt becomes our debt. As soon as you say I do, there's no more his and her or yours and mine. It's our debt, right?
Yeah.
So so when you guys came together and it was our debt, what did that look like paying that off?
So at first we made a plan. I made a plan, I should say. And it sounded like a good plan on the surface based on the circumstances, but it was actually one of the worst things we can do. Fortunately, we caught our mistake and fixed it. So here's the mistake. I came up with the idea because I was new in learning financial literacy. I was still coming into the knowledge of it. Ty already was smart with money. My idea was, since you're smart with this stuff, you go ahead, you handle all the finances. You just let me know, what I can spend on myself. And then, you make the plan and we'll just do the plan. And so we did that for a few months. And what happened was on both sides, hers and mine, we were both silently building resentment and didn't know it because I wasn't involved. I was just being handed a certain amount of money. I knew how much I made a year. I knew how much I made a month. I knew how much I made every 2 weeks compared to what she said I could spend on myself. And I was frustrated because I felt like a kid being handed an allowance. And on the other hand, she was frustrated because my frustration when she was doing all this work. Number one, I created the debt. And number two, she was creating the plan. She was doing the numbers, the budgeting. She was sending money, sending there and here and working things out. And I was complaining like, this is all I get? I mean, come on, man, I make this much, blah, blah, blah. And what we realized once we both confessed that we were frustrated by the process was I was not in the game. I was on the sidelines waving a towel like, go Ty, go, you're doing it, man. You're winning. And what you need to do in a relationship is you both need to have your hands to the plow. Now, that doesn't mean that there's a 50-50 thing going on with the money. Sometimes it will be, but teamwork doesn't always equal 50-50. And we tell people this story. We're a big time Chicago Bulls fan. And in the 90s, when we were kids, it was all about the Bulls because they were in the midst of winning 6 championships. So if I say to, hey, everybody listening, do you know who Michael Jordan is? Of course, everybody's going to know who that is, right? The greatest basketball player of all time. By the way, there's no debate as to who's the greatest basketball player of all time.
Yeah.
But if I then say, hey, and maybe you know now because you might have watched the documentary, but before the documentary, if I would have said, hey, who's BJ Armstrong? Most people wouldn't know who that is. And during the first few championships of the 6, Michael Jordan was the shooting guard and BJ Armstrong was the point guard. And they were both in the same backcourt at the same time, but they didn't both have 50-50 responsibility. Opposing coaches weren't game planning for BJ Armstrong the same way they were game planning for Michael Jordan, but they were game planning for both because they both played their roles well. And because they both played their roles well, they both became champions. And the same thing in the context of money and marriage. Ty is still the better one as far as numbers and all that. I can do it, no problem. I got the skill set. I don't have the desire like she does. Like she lights up. Her brain, her serotonin, all that stuff lights up. Her dopamine goes crazy when she's doing budgets and spreadsheets, okay? And so she does it. But before it's finalized, I then come into the conversation. I look at it. I give feedback. I ask questions. And then based on both of our input, the final decision for the month is made. And so now that I have input, I also have accountability. This is no longer her plan that I'm offended by. This is a plan that we both created together that I'm accountable to. And so that's how we were able to get the process together. That's the first biggest piece to the puzzle. The second biggest piece to the puzzle was early in our financial literacy together, we read a book by who's now Senator Elizabeth Warren. Back then, she was Professor Elizabeth Warren. She wrote a book called The 2-Income Trap with her daughter. Highly recommended reading. And what they spelled out was that most people in relationships end up in a 2-income trap because they built a life that required 2 incomes. So when they went to get their first mortgage, it required both incomes. And then they both got cars because they could afford it because they had 2 incomes. And they got separate credit cards and they've got a pair of student loans. And then life changes. Somebody wants to come home with the kids. Somebody wants to start a business. Somebody wants to go back to school, but they can't because their life depends on 2 incomes. And so they're trapped. That's the name, the 2-income trap. And so we always built our life on, as far as expenses go, on one salary. So even when we had 2 incomes, we were living off one and using the other to get out of debt. And then after that, using the other to try to build wealth. And then life did change. Ty wanted to come home after, during her pregnancy with baby number 2. And we were able to do that because we were accustomed to living on one salary. And so we were able to make those decisions. And it's something we still adapt to today. So even if you're a single person listening, you shouldn't be living off 100% of your income. You should be living off half or 60 or 70 or 80, but definitely not 100%. So those factors were what propelled us to get out of debt with the consumer debt. And then later on, we tackled our mortgage. We paid off over $330,000 in 5 years. And so now we're a 100% debt-free family.
So yeah, and I want to definitely talk about this epic moment because that's like the pinnacle point. Like right now where I'm at is we're chopping away at this mortgage. I want to talk about that, but a couple of things you said that really it kind of brought back some memories with me is so the 2-income trap. Yep. That is, I never heard this term, and I can't tell you how true it is. So 2 years ago, my wife worked full time. She was a television news anchor, and it's not a job that is it's good for kids. I mean, you're never home. When you are home, you're sleeping because you get up at 2:30 in the morning. And so it was tough, right? It was really tough. And we knew that we needed her to stay home. And so we took our 2 incomes and we started plowing away at our debt, and we started plowing away at other things and building up an emergency reserve that was pretty large. So when it came time to cut ties, we could live comfortably. But what I didn't realize is so last week, we did an episode on affluenza. There's a book out there. I don't know if you've read it before. Affluenza.
Check that out.
It's a kind of play on words, affluency plus influenza mixed together. It was actually coined in the late 90s. Okay. And now it's an actual definition. And so it talks about affluenza in America. And so we as Americans, as our culture, we spend 95% of our income.
Wow.
Okay, we spend it. Okay, we have about a 5% savings rate. That's double from 2008. Now, if you look at other countries, for example, Singapore has a 50% savings rate, which means they only spend 50% of their income. China's like 47%. So you have all these other countries that they spend a lot less. They live off of the one income principle, right? And so when you were saying that, it just kind of made me think to myself, like, oh my gosh, what he was doing is kind of what we were talking about last week with affluenza, but it's so freeing. And I would tell you, and I'm sure you would agree with this, but those of you listening, you probably think to yourself, oh my gosh, if I had to go down to one income, I don't think I could survive. And it's just the opposite. It frees you from being trapped, right? Yeah. I feel like the financial world wants to trap you, right? The marketing of the financial world.
100%
their trap.
100% intentional. 100% intentional. Everything from pay attention to what's from a financial standpoint. Pay attention to what's advertised, right? You see certain banks talking about what credit cards, right? Mm-hmm. Why? Because they know most people are going to mess up with the credit cards and they're going to get those interest payments. Why do you think it's easier to get a student loan than a business loan? Because student loan debt is one of the number one assets of the United States government. The interest that is paid off of the $1 trillion of student loan debt goes into the pockets of the government. Mm-hmm. If you look at, what do you see commercials of? Mutual funds or index funds? Mutual funds, because mutual funds have higher fees and kickbacks as opposed to index funds. They don't. So you pay attention to what's advertised, and it's not unintentional. The thing about it is, and it goes way deeper than that. We have to understand that we are in a war for our dollars. Every time we go to the store and we swipe that debit card, that credit card, there's a data file being built or added to on our spending habits. And that data is legally sold to marketers who can then market to us based on our spending habits. It's not accidental that what you just talked about with your friend on the phone is now a Facebook ad next time you log in, because they are targeting you. They are targeting your dollars, and it is absolutely intentional.
And one other thing that I want to add, that this was mind-blowing to me. So I sit down with so many people, and the number one thing is kind of like you says, like, I don't like all this financial stuff. It complicates me. It makes it complicated. I don't like all these terms and everything. And it started hitting me that personal finance, it's like I think you need to know about 3rd to 5th grade math, right? To balance your budget. But the financial world has made it so complicated, and they use terms that are so ridiculous.
So you can depend on them.
Because the less you know, the more they make. Just make that equation simple. The less you know about finance, the more they make. And once I sit down and we work out a budget or we talk about savings, people are like, well, that's it? They're just almost kind of blown away. Like, what do you mean that's it? There's nothing more to it. I'm like, no, that's it. That's how it works. And but they just can't get their mind around, because the financial world has complicated things on purpose, right? The less you know, the more they make. That's why
the more you're willing to outsource to them. Because if you don't feel comfortable, if you don't feel qualified, if you don't feel knowledgeable, you're willing to sit down with somebody else and pay somebody else to figure it out for you.
Exactly. Yep. And so, I mean, and so on the flip side of that, the education, the financial world, we can go on and on. I'm getting excited about this. The education you're getting from the finance world is this, right? It is what's in your wallet, right? It is Visa everywhere. You know, it's marketing to the point where you ask a young kid now, how do you buy a car? And they think the only way on earth to buy a car is to go get a loan for 84 months.
Yep.
That's it. That's the only option in the world to buy a car. They don't realize you could actually save up money and pay cash for cars. They really don't realize this, because they've been ingrained over and over and over again that life is about payments. Life is about payments for the rest of your life. And if you don't like it, tough, right? And I'm like, no, there's a better way. So kind of speaking on that right there.
Yeah.
So the majority of people out there, if you ask them, having a paid off mortgage doesn't even seem feasible for people anymore, right? In fact, getting a house doesn't even seem feasible, especially for a young couple today, maybe a young millennial couple. Buying a house when they have $100,000 in student loan debt doesn't seem like it'll ever happen. And I'm on the opposite side, saying not only will it happen, but you will someday pay off that mortgage, and it's not going to take you 30 years or 40 years or 50 years because of refinancing. You will do it way faster than you think. If I would have told you this when you were sitting there getting ready to tell your wife that, you know, I have a secret that I want to share with you, that, hey man, 5 years from now, your mortgage is going to be paid off. What would you have said?
I would have said, heck no, because I'd never seen it, never heard of it, never knew nobody that did it. And I think that's why it's important that people like us and the work that we do I see Jacob Wade in here, and stuff that Jacob does with iHeart Budgets is important because we give examples, right? Mm-hmm. So when we did it live, and you're on the journey and you're walking your audience through it. You're hitting milestones, you're letting people know, because when people are able to see it, then it becomes feasible, right? If you've literally never heard of anybody paying off a mortgage in 5 years, you will never think that it's possible. But because me and my wife and my children, we went live at the bank, it's being on the screen right now. If you're able to watch it, that's us in the bank. We got dressed up. We got our kids dressed up. We made it a big deal because we wanted to make sure it was something that they remembered. And then we decided to go live because we wanted other people, other families to know that this is something that we did. And we did it on one income. I was a teacher. I wasn't knocking down six figures. My salary was under six figures, and that was our only salary. But we had a whole lot of discipline and determination, and we made up in our mind, firstly, that we weren't going to wait 30 years to be a homeowner or owner of our home. We don't say homeowner anymore. We're the owners of our home. A lot of people are homeowners, but we actually own our home. And so we did it so that other people can look at us and say, if they could do it, then we could do it. But no, if you would have told me that when I was in the midst of just the beginning, I would have said there's no way, because I had no representation to make me think otherwise. And that's why we do the work that we do. And that's why you're doing the work that you do, so people can find hope in us and create their own stories and their own narratives.
So those of you watching right now, I just was showing the video of them actually going into the bank, paying off their mortgage. I'll put a link in the show notes. So don't worry if you're listening, you want to watch that. We'll have a link in the show notes, moneypeach.com/137. I'll put that video right there so you can watch it there. It's pretty magical. And I mean, this video went viral when people saw it, because it's like you said, most people don't realize that this is even a possibility. Like, what do you mean not have a mortgage payment? Most people, what's the biggest expense in most people's lives?
It's definitely mortgage,
right? I would say that for the majority of people out there, the mortgage. Mm-hmm. So what would that feel like to remove that payment from your life for good?
Now, pause right there, Peach. That's the question you have to ask yourself up front. You have to not only ask yourself that question, but you have to close your eyes and you have to imagine what that would feel like. Like, breathe that in. Like, okay, if we didn't have a mortgage payment anymore, would we keep the same job? Would we live the same way? What would be different about our life if we didn't have a mortgage? And answer that question before you make a move. Like, answer that question. Like, what would you do differently? How would your life feel? How would you feel? What type of legacy would that create for you? Like, talk that out. Like, don't dismiss it. Talk it out. Yeah, it was far-fetched for us. We had one income at the time. We had a whole bunch of question marks over our situation at the time, because there's a whole lot of transition going on at the time. Everything wasn't lined up perfectly for us to say, yo, we're getting rid of this mortgage in 5 years. Actually, everything was imperfect. We had just had, a week later, baby number 3 was born. Okay. I was starting at a new school. I was a teacher. I was starting at a new school. So I didn't know what my salary was going to be like compared to what it was. We were moving into a house, right? We didn't have a house before, so we didn't know like how big the utilities were going to be and all this other stuff, the upkeep. And so we didn't have everything figured out, but we declared right from the moment. And by the way, we walked into the bank the clip you just saw and the one that's linked in the show notes of this episode. We walked into the bank and made that last payment 5 years to the date that we closed on the house. 5 years to the date. Wow. And we made that declaration up front when things were not. I want to make sure everybody listening gets this point. We made this declaration when everything was not lined up. We said, we're going to pay this house off in 5 years. That number one, we set it a goal and we said it out loud and we said it to each other. The second declaration that we made was, we are never going to make a minimum payment on this mortgage. We said it out loud. We said it to each other, right? And these declarations happened when things were not lined up perfectly. So much so Then when we finally sat down and we started looking at the numbers, because there were so many question marks as to what direction our finances would be going in with all these transitions, the only thing that we could agree to do extra on top of our existing mortgage payment was an extra $20. That's it. That's how the journey started. We called the bank and we set it up on automatic. We said, hey, can you every month take an additional $20 and apply it to principal of this loan and set it up automatically? So that kept us in alignment with the declaration that we weren't going to make a minimum payment. We couldn't throw a bunch of money at that very moment, but what we could do, we did. And so as we get on in the journey, we got more and more creative. We started cutting back here and there and throwing everything, the mortgage, raises, tax refunds, everything we could possibly do, we did. And 5 years later, done.
Unbelievable. I mean, I like, as you're talking, I wish you could see my skin here, man. I got like goosebumps all over it, man. I'm like, we're in that mindset right now. I think we're about 16 months away. If we're looking at spreadsheets. I'm the spreadsheet guy, right? My wife's like you. I'm like your wife, I'm the spreadsheet guy and I have it all planned out. I'm looking at it. I'm like, hey, we're going to add this. We're going to throw this at it. This is going to come here. And it's not perfect, right? I mean, when we started, just like on our side, when we thought we're going to pay off our mortgage, my wife was working full-time in the news industry. Mm-hmm. And we realized, I said, you know what, we're still going to pay the mortgage off in the same amount of time. You're not going to work anymore at the news station because you don't want to. You want to be home with the kids, and we're going to figure it out. And every single time I believed in something, maybe it doesn't happen in the same journey or the same time frame that I had in mind. Mm-hmm. But if I keep focused and I know it's the righteous thing to do, just like with you guys, I mean, like crazy things happen to the day, 5 years, yep. to the day,
June 12, 2013 to June 12, 2018.
So you just came up on it. Yeah. Just an anniversary.
Yeah. We just had our 2-year anniversary. We did a video about our 2-year anniversary. And I'll tell you this, Peach, so you and Andrea are on that journey. It doesn't get old, bro. 2 years later, it's still the exact same high. Like we pull up sometimes and our kids say, we're pulling up to our debt-free house. You see what I'm saying? That's legacy right there. Like you can't put that statement into a calculator or a spreadsheet. Nothing against your spreadsheets, Peach, but there's some intangible things that you cannot compute when your kids realize all the sacrifices that you made. When your kids realize, see, this becomes their normal. You talked about earlier how people are the car payment is the norm. Not here, not in these 4 walls. And that's the power that each one of us have. We get to change the narrative inside of our 4 walls for ourselves, for our kids, so that what's normal to the rest of the world is abnormal to them. We've never had a car note in our entire 14-year marriage. They don't know nothing about a car note. It's cash. Cash cars over here. We don't have a mortgage over here. You may have to start with one, but you're not going to keep one. You see what I'm saying? We're giving them definitions of what the money game looks like. And you don't have to be a financial expert like us or you and Andrea. You can just be you, the person listening, and make a decision like, yo, I know the cards I was given, but I'm going to give my kids a different set of cards. I'm going to give them a different set of mindsets and mentalities and behaviors around money. I'm going to give them a head start that I wasn't given.
You're changing your family tree.
That's it.
There is no debt in your family tree moving forward. Mm-hmm. It changed with you. It changed with you and your wife, right? Yep. And from this point forward, the norm is to be debt-free. The norm is to save up and pay cash for things. The norm is to not have a 30-year mortgage, but have a 5-year mortgage. Mm-hmm. This is the new norm that you have created. And the great thing is we all get to create this, right? Mm-hmm. I love the thing I love about you is you say this in your videos. And by the way, I want you guys to head on over to their YouTube channel. It's pretty spectacular. Just listening here to Tyler, you can see that there's passion, right? You can see that there's a reason why they've had so much success. There's a reason why people are listening to them. There's a reason why they're America's number one couple money, America's number one, what am I saying here? Money couple. Yeah. America's number one money couple is because the passion's there. The passion's there. And when you're talking, I get excited. Like I get excited. I get motivated. And here's the deal. How much was your inheritance that you got to pay off all your debt?
Let me get my calculator. Zero.
Zero. Okay. How much money was just given to you to pay off your debt.
We came from the bottom. Didn't come from money. We had good upbringings. We weren't poor. We weren't in poverty, but we were not rich. We did not receive an inheritance. We started with a negative net worth. We started not on the same page financially, and we grinded out to get to the place that we're at now. And that's what we're trying to tell other people, man. You don't have to have this special set of circumstances. Where you're at right now is not ideal. Neither was the starting point that Ty and I were on. The starting point was not ideal, but we started the race, man, and we got to where we are today. You can start your own race. I don't care what you're up against. Our show, like, if you go to our website, hisandhermoney.com, and you'll see that we have literally 300 to 400 debt-free stories. If our story isn't convincing enough, you can listen to other people's story. You can watch other people's story, and I bet you find somebody in your set of circumstances who just made a decision like, this may be where I'm at today, but this is not where my future will lie. And they went to work and they got it done, and you can too.
I love it. So head on over to hisandhermoney.com. If you can't remember that right now, just go to moneypeach.com/session 137. That's moneypeach.com/session 137. Any podcast app you're listening to, if you open up the app, there's going to be a link in there that's going to say show notes. Click on that. It'll take you to anything that we talked about today. You have to watch the video of them going into the bank. That is the number one takeaway for today after listening to this is do yourself a favor and go watch that video and then call your bank up. And I don't care if it's $5 or $20 or $100 or whatever you can afford, but I am going to challenge you. Don't just listen to this and say, this was a great interview. I love talking money. I want you to take action. $20, $5, $100, whatever you think you can squeeze out, start.
Do it.
You can always add more. 5 years later, McNeelys have a paid off house and their kids drive up to a paid off house and they say, there's our debt-free house.
Yeah.
I want that for your family. I want that for your future generations. We both do. That's why we're here. So thanks so much for listening. Any last words of wisdom, Talaat?
Yeah, I would tell people that the truth is you can do it. There are a lot of reasons you can say, based on this situation, based on this circumstance, I don't think I can do what they did. I don't think I can do what Peach and Andrea are doing. And that is absolutely false. Don't believe that lie. If you didn't hear anything, know that we started from less than ideal circumstances and we still made it out. So yeah, your circumstances might be less than ideal, but you can still make it out. Do not, from this moment forward, from the conclusion of this episode, don't ever believe the lie ever again in your life that your situation can't be turned around, because it absolutely can.
I love it. I'm going to end it right there, my friends, because I can't say it any better. Thanks so much, Ryan, for coming on the show. And we're going to do this again. We're going to bring your wife on next time. She's going to tell her side of the story. Thanks again.